Hello, mossy multitudes. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded in a while. That's my fault, and I don't really have an excuse. But in the future, I'm going to give you a slurry of both voiced over memes and myth summaries. And that's a mossball promise, not a real promise. But enough about that. Today's myth is the beginning. The beginning of what, mossball? The beginning of Greek myths, you silly goose. How it all starts is with nothing. Just the barren cosmos in which no life arises. And then there's something. And that something is Gaia. Gaia isn't really a god, nor is she a titan. She's a third kind of primordial deity that comes before the other two. Gaia embodied the physical earth we stand on, and she was the only being alive in the entire cosmos. So naturally, she was lonely and a little bit horny. We've all been there, sister. Some of us are still there. So Gaia used the power of creation for the very first time to make someone, to keep her company. And that someone was Ouranos, the sky. The other pronunciation of Ouranos is Uranus, but I think I'm going to use the former for this video. I don't know why, it just felt right to me. So she and Ouranos had kids. And they made the Titans, the coupling of earth and sky. Technically, Ouranos is Gaia's son, but we're just going to have to get past that because that's how Greek myths are. The Titans were the first beings to embody the form that we humans now have, except they were probably a little more muscular and handsome. But Ouranos liked them very much. There were 12 Titans, and so naturally with this success, he wanted to try for babies again. So they made another batch. And these were called the Hecatoncheires. I butchered that pronunciation. These beings had 100 hands, and their Greek name translates to 100-handed ones in English. Now, Ouranos much preferred the template they'd come up with earlier, and he didn't like these new 100-handed variants, so he tossed them into Gaia's womb and shut them in there. Gaia's womb is Tartarus, and that's where people get tortured, but it didn't have that reputation yet. It was just sort of Gaia's innards. That part always confused me, though, that Gaia couldn't fight back. Like, girl, you made him. Just unmake him. And then they try for babies again. They make the Cyclopses. Cyclopses are cool as hell, but Ouranos doesn't like them. One eye? Well, the Titans have 2 eyes. Why don't these have 2 eyes? And so we sort of have Ouranos to thank for beauty standards, because he's the first one who ever enforced them. Boom, they get locked in Gaia's womb too. Maybe I should have used the other pronunciation for him, because this guy's a real asshole. Eventually Gaia gets fed up with this. She loves all of her children. And so she told her youngest Titan, Kronos, to kill his father. And he was like, yeah, sure. So she made a scythe out of the crescent of the moon and handed it to him. Kronos proceeds to brutally, viciously tear up Ouranos, and he scattered Ouranos' parts. Now in Greek mythology, as opposed to Norse mythology, gods cannot die, but scattering them, like cutting them up and scattering their pieces, that's as close as you can get. Ouranos, scattered as he was, could not influence the world around him, and he couldn't even form coherent thought either. It's like a vegetative state for a god. So he was out of the picture, but there was a new threat on the horizon. The guy who willingly and unhesitatingly killed his dad, Kronos. And Kronos had a wife named Rhea. Before you ask, yes, she was his sister. But he'd heard a prophecy that one day his child would overthrow him. So he's like, well, we can't have that. So instead of just not having sex, he decides to famously eat his children. So children 1 through 5 went down his gullet, but by the time the 6th one was cooking in the old oven, Rhea decided she'd had enough. She didn't want to watch the 6th baby get eaten just like all the rest. When the 6th one, Zeus, comes along, Rhea swaddles up a rock and gives it to Kronos so that he'll eat that instead. And Kronos' inability or refusal to chew backfires because he does not notice that it's a rock. And Zeus is allowed to grow up on a faraway island without parental figures, which explains a lot. When Zeus is an adult, he hears the voice of Gaia speak to him. Gaia tells him, hey big guy, you actually have 5 siblings, but they're inside your dad right now, and we need to get them out. And so, she lets him know of a little Gaia trick, which is mixing mustard into wine to make the most awful, terrible concoction one could ever dream of. And then, feed that to Kronos. So Zeus does. While Kronos is sleeping, he pours the mustard wine in his mouth, and then Kronos pukes up all of Zeus's siblings. There's Demeter, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Poseidon. And so, with all those children out of his stomach, in like mature adult forms now, surprisingly unscarred from digestive acid, and well-toned despite their lack of exercise, they are able to beat Kronos. And then Zeus takes the scythe, and just like his dad, he cuts Kronos up into tiny pieces, starting with one piece in particular, Kronos' dick and balls. This he throws into the ocean, and where the droplets of blood fall on the land, it births the giants, and where it falls into the sea, it makes Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Anyway, Zeus and his 5 siblings go on to found Olympus, after scattering Kronos' parts and putting him in the same state as Ouranos. To determine which gods rule over what, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades draw straws to determine who gets the heavens, the sea, and the underworld. But wait, Mossball, weren't there 3 other gods? Yeah, there were. Anyway, Zeus gets the sky, Poseidon gets the sea, and Hades, poor Hades, gets the underworld. So he doesn't really get to spend time with his siblings, but he still remains the best god out of all of them. Besides Hestia, she's just too nice. And that concludes this myth. Thanks for waiting so long, because gods know it took me a long time to get to this. Anyway, I've got other myths in the works, and I'll get them to you sooner rather than later. Hopefully. We'll see. But until then, enjoy your November. This is Mossball, signing off.